I'm going to start by sharing my screen. I've set a few slides that we can discuss. If this is visible to everybody, let me know. Can everybody see this?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
All right. So basically today what I wanted to talk about was the changing energy mix in the global scenario. What does that mean going forward for countries, not just in Asia like China and India, which are net energy consumers, but also net energy exporters in the Middle East, and how does that kind of pan out against countries in the West, in North America and Western Europe, who are looking at a continuously changing world economy. These are broad trends that I wanted to, sort of broad agenda that I wanted to discuss. The energy consumptions and trends we can pick up today. The scenario about India and how things would pan out going forward for the country, including the role of oil and gas in India's total energy requirements. How is the refining capacity in India panning out? And as India moves towards a more cleaner and a sort of a net zero and a greener society, how does that kind of play out? But today we will look at the total energy consumption and the historical energy consumption that kind of exists in the globe. By energy consumption, I talk about not just electricity, which is one of the sort of aspects of energy, but we will be talking about both the primary sources of energy to begin with, and then how secondary sources, which include heating, electricity, etc., kind of come in. As I was preparing data for this presentation, the one thing that sort of stuck out was how is it that the Asian economies are today in a different position when it comes to the rest of the world, because going forward their energy needs are going to increase, and how is that increase in energy going to be substituted by clean energy and renewable sources. Whilst the world kind of talks about renewables and clean energy, one thing that we should not forget, and that'll come out in the data that I'll be sharing, is that the role of oil and gas, the conventional sort of fossil fuels, still are very much prevalent. The importance and the role of coal going forward is going to go down, is going to suddenly drop, but even coal by no means will be sort of completely done away with. That will still remain as an important and prevalent source of electricity and energy. It is just that its total share is going to come down. However, that is not the case for oil and gas. Oil and gas, especially natural gas, in the context of energy production, in the context of electricity generation, will remain a very important source of energy. We from the energy world keep hearing about renewables, keep hearing about the role that clean energy will play going forward, what solar and wind are going to do for the rest of the world. And whilst that is a sort of very important aspect, what we should not forget is that the conventional sources of energy will still remain and play an important part. So just kind of going back to how we see the sort of energy usage and the energy transition, and the energy sort of consumption that has taken place over the past years. We've kind of seen that over the last, say, 30 years or so, starting 1980, near about, let's say, about 278 exajoules of energy were consumed across the world. And if you kind of juxtapose that with where we are expected to be by 2050, now that is going to grow up almost 3 times to about 743 exajoules. That gives it a sort of a 167% increase in the total energy consumption. And we're just talking about primary energy. We're not talking about secondary energy, which talks about heating and electricity going forward. But just the very basic use of energy consumption is going to grow, has grown tremendously and expected to grow over the coming few years. There was a slight drop in 2020 as the world tackled with the COVID virus. Most of the industries shut down. A large part of manufacturing had shut down. Transportation was very, very heavily hit, especially when it comes to air travel, and still hasn't really picked up. I was in the UAE yesterday for the last couple of days to attend the ADIPEC. And you could see that international air travel is still just about picking up. Both at Bombay airport when I took off and landed, and at Dubai airport when I landed and took off. The volumes of passengers was perhaps a third or one-fourth of what I used to see at its peak levels. There was no traffic, nobody was around, most of the shops were shut, and even at security, at immigration, there was just hardly any crowd. And that is why last year we saw that for the first time in a long time, there was actually a drop, and a considerable drop of about 4.5% in the total energy consumption in the world, which was, and the primary factor for that was oil, because whilst people were still at home and they were working and the electricity consumption was still going on, the actual transportation was tremendously hit. So whether it was road transport or rail to a very large extent, sea on ocean transport still kind of about maintained because people needed goods and services, but because manufacturing being hit, that had also taken a bit of a drop. But the biggest factor, kind of near about 10%, came from oil. However, going forward, if we look at it, starting from, let's say, from now till about 2050, we are still looking at a 26% increase in growth, where say let's about 589. So this growth from about 589 exajoules to about 743 exajoules, that is still a 26% increase that is going to take place. Now, where is all this going to come from, right? Being a driller, being an oil man, I still continue to kind of be very bullish about oil and gas. And we're just talking about 2020 numbers. In spite of the growth in renewables over the last 10 years, oil still has the largest share. About a third of our total energy, the primary energy mix, still comes from oil. And as much as we kind of vilify coal, and as much as the world is moving away from coal, even today, coal falls just slightly below oil. Now, if you look at oil, natural gas, oil, coal, and natural gas, you're still talking about near 80% of our total energy mix still comes from these three sources. It is definitely going to go down over the next coming few years, as the further slides will show. The energy transition really picks up pace from 2030 onwards. 2030, 2040, 2050 are going to be landmark years for clean energy, green energy, energy transition, whatever you may care to call it. But that still doesn't discount the fact that oil and gas are there to remain for the longest period of time. And as much as we may hate it, so is going to be coal, right? Now, whether you would talk about any sort of geographical area, whether it is Africa or Europe or even North America, which are perhaps at the leading forefront of EVs, of sort of going into electrification of transport, even there we see across the board the sort of hold of oil and gas. Now, and this is not just kind of me talking; these are actual sheer numbers. In 2020, there was a slight drop, kind of dropped about 2%. It dropped from I think in 2019 we got just about I think 98 million barrels of oil in 2019, which has dropped. But going forward, right, if we look at between 2020 to sort of 2050, right, you're looking at an increase of from 19 million barrels of oil a day to about 103 million barrels of oil a day. That's about a 17% increase for oil, right? So when people talk about energy transition, when people talk about the role that oil and gas are going to play going forward in our energy mix, we need to see that there is going to be a drop in terms of year on year drop going forward, but in terms of actual production, right, in terms of actual consumption, both oil and gas are going to see an increase. Now, we're talking about a 17% increase in oil. Gas actually sees a much larger increase. We say about 28% from near about 4,000 BCM to 5,113 BCM. Right? That is a substantial increase going forward. And both these fuels will remain in our midst for a longer period of time. Gas, definitely. As the world moves away from coal, the sort of first step in a lot of emerging markets and a lot of countries going sort of looking at energy as sort of as a sustainable sort and a regular, continuous, dependable form of energy. The next step is, in most cases, gas. Yes, the newer volumes that are coming in are going to see a lot of renewables, clean and green energy, but the role of gas where it exists today cannot be sort of changed. So where does this kind of lead us, right? Now, I've taken into account just the four: coal, oil, gas, and renewables, as we kind of look at the move starting from 2020 going onwards till 2050. There was somebody had a question. How many years will oil be finished? I don't think it's going to be finished. That's anybody's guess. We were looking at oil finishing by 2010, 2020 for some as a matter of fact. Anyways, perhaps this idea about the consumption of oil will give you an example. So in 2020, as I said, and this is oil, we consumed about 88 million barrels of crude of oil. By 2050, we are going to produce 103 million barrels of oil a day. So if you're producing 103 million barrels of oil a day, that to my mind is not something that is kind of going away in a hurry, right? This is something that at least my children will resource that my children will have for some time. Now, if you look at the sort of primary energy source as we care to call it, let's first, so I kind of digressed when we were talking about oil. Let's talk about all these four resources today. And when I talk about renewables, I take into account solar, I take into account wind, and I also take into account nuclear. What I have not taken into account here is large hydro. That is an important aspect, and perhaps that could be covered in a separate section. But today, when I talk about renewables, I only talk about wind, I talk about solar, and I talk about nuclear. So as you can see, right, the sort of biggest jump in actual consumption comes from renewable energy, right? In 2010, just about 69 exajoules of your total primary energy consumption came from renewables, and that's going to jump to a whooping 323 exajoules. That sort of gives you a almost 3 times 205% increase, right? Now, and this has been borne by the countries looking at cleaning up their act. Countries not just in Asia, not just in Western Europe and North America, which have traditionally been sort of more inclined or more sort of progressive enough, let's put it this way, to look at clean energy, having built up their economies over the last 60, 70, 80 years on the back of fossil fuels. And because of this, there has been this sort of continued thought process where they are moving away from fossil fuels and from traditional sources of energy and moving into renewables. And this shows us, where we are. In 2010, the total sort of primary energy that came from renewables was just about 70 exajoules. That moved to about 100 in 2020, and we're looking at 323 coming out of it over the next 30 years. And that by far is going to be the biggest chunk. If you look at the other sort of aspects that come in, and again, at the sort of risk of being repetitive, nobody can discount that gas today plays one of the most important roles when it comes gas, oil, and coal today play one of the major role in the total energy mix. So 193 exajoules of the total primary energy consumption in the world was supplied by gas. And when you look for going forward, that kind of increases to 237 exajoules. That is an increase of about 23%. And this is an increase of about 200%. Right now, the major driver for the use of gas comes from not just gas-fired power plants, which today people look at being more, or let's say less carbon intensive than coal and oil, but also in terms of transportation. Whilst there is a definitive move where the companies are adopting electric vehicles for transportation, and electric transportation is increasing. A lot of places around the world, not just in India, but in the Middle East as well, transportation on the back of CNG, which is compressed natural gas, is finding a big place. We have seen over the last at least 15 years, growing economies like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, most of the economies in the Middle East today have a certain section of the transportation which is dedicated to the gas industry. That is why things like LNG, things like the city gas distribution network is going to play a huge role going forward. Let's kind of now come to oil. Oil in 2020, I think we consumed about 179 exajoules, and that going forward is not going to come down, but is going to increase to about 200 exajoule. That still gives you an increase of about 12%. Right. So again, these fuels, whether it is oil or gas, these fuels are going to remain in our given energy mix. These are not going away in a hurry. Obviously, their growth is going to come down. Oil is just going to grow at 12% over the next 30 years. Gas is going to grow at just 23%. Is going to grow at around 23%. Solar and wind combined are going to more than triple to grow at about 203%. And these three will form the bulk of the energy mix going forward. Where does that leave coal? Right? There are countries in the world, which include China and India primarily, that are not going to kick their coal habit in a hurry. We are countries, and not China and India probably because of the quantum of energy that they're going to be consuming. But let us not take into account growing nations in Africa, which are today setting up power plants. Well, I was driving back from Adipec. I was driving back from Abu Dhabi to Dubai. I passed the site of one of the largest coal-fired plants in the Middle East that is being set up with Chinese help. They call it clean coal. To my mind, coal cannot be clean. You can capture some amount of carbon off of it, but you're still going to be relying on burning dirty coal to fire up your power plants, and that is a reality that we have to face. Unfortunately, coal is kind of still exists. Today, it is the near dominant form. It is the dominant form. Coal, about 255. The largest chunk of our energy today comes from burning coal. Now, this 255 is going to fall down fairly drastically to about 178, but it's still there. right? You're looking at a massive 30% drop, right? You're looking at the crude consumption or the coal consumption falling by a third, but it is still there. One third of the largest energy source still produces near about half of your energy as compared to renewables, right? At 178 exajoules, the coal will produce a little more than half of the total clean energy that is going up. So as much as we can talk about pollution, as much as we say that the world is moving away from both gas and oil, unfortunately there's coal also that exists. This is what I was talking about, right? You've got oil that, and this is just sort of a representation of exactly what I've spoken about. This gives you the actual numbers. What I was what I had kind of mentioned here. You still have these four dominant, well, renewables, if you want to break it up into so this is coal, obviously, this is gas, this is oil, and this is renewables, right? So you have these sort of four chunks which will supply the bulk of the energy going forward, right? The role that renewables is going to play and is going to be primarily in the generation of electricity, whether we're going to have solar fired plants or we're going to have wind fired plants going forward. Uh, the move away, and here we're seeing that the 30% drop in coal consumption will primarily come from the, not so much heating, because heating doesn't use that much of coal. Heating, we still rely, or the West, where it becomes very, very cold, still relies on gas for their heating purposes. But this sort of decided drop in coal consumption will be fed because of increased use of renewable energy, solar and wind, when it comes to generating of electricity. Across the world, we've seen that, and this is going to be borne out by sort of the following slides, which I show, where I look at coal, I look at renewables, I look at gas and oil, and hydrogen, and so not hydrogen, large hydro projects, and the effect that they will have on the energy generation by various countries. Uh, to say that electricity is an important aspect of energy is going to be stating the obvious, but unfortunately, even today, majority of the world, we are still lucky and we are still fortunate that we live in parts of the world where we can rely on dependent electricity and power 24/7 into 365. But there are countries where this is, or even parts of various countries, even in India, there are cities and villages which cannot rely on continuous power for the rest of the world. There was a study which was done by, I think it was IEA, which said that there are still more than 750 million people which do not have access to electricity. A bulk of that is in Africa and the developing countries of Asia. But if you look at even developed countries, there are countries which would have faced some sort of what used to be called as load shedding, but in the larger parlance is seen a scenario where continuous full voltage electricity is not available for all 24 hours. That has been continuously improving, and whilst over the last few years there had been a spurt in ensuring that almost everybody gets this very valuable source, which is electricity and power today. Unfortunately, between 2019 and 2021, primarily owing to the slowdown due to pandemic and due to the supply chain that was affected and the localized lockdown, we've actually seen that there would be a decrease in the total average electricity penetration, which is not very good news. The sort of positive aspect of that is that the additional energy that is going to be coming in, or the additional power supply that is going to be coming in, is going to be relying largely on gas, is going to be relying largely on solar and wind, thus ensuring that the delta going forward, or the incremental increase in energy going forward, will be coming in primarily from the clean sources of energy. So this is what I'm kind of talking about. That starting in 1985, and I've not gone back too far back, where we consume just about 9,900 terawatt of energy, to kind of going up to 45 terawatt of energy. You were almost looking at a 4.5x increase going forward. And whilst that is sort of the and a phenomena that is fairly impressive, even though the increase has been steady, as you can see, the expectation is, once the effects of the pandemic are taken care of, and once the countries kind of ensure whether they're moving towards net zero, or whether they're moving towards the discussions made during COP26, or whether there are commitments made by respective governments in order to ensure that electricity today is supplied to that 750 or 770 million that still does not get electricity, we are going to see a near 52% jump going forward between 2030, between 2030 and 2050. And where is kind of this bulk of energy going to come from? So if you look at the installed capacity generation, sorry, if you look at the installed capacity generation, and this is something that we had spoken about, the sort of mega increase will come in from renewables, and you're talking about almost 290% increase going forward from near about 3,000 gigawatts. So here I'm looking at the installed capacity of coal, renewables, oil and gas, and hydro. Large hydro projects do play a big role, and this is something that I kind of wanted to highlight in my discussion here. But this 290%, as I said, and this, which will be the driver for this 52% going forward, is going to be this bulk that is going to be coming in from renewables. Sorry, I've spelled renewables wrong. My apologies for that. Again, going back to my theme of oil and gas, we see that 2000 the current installed capacity for oil, which is limited, but primarily natural gas, is about 2,200 gigawatts, which will increase to about 3,000 gigawatts, and there you're looking at an almost 30% increase, right? So whilst you're looking at almost 4 times the increase for renewable energy, you still have an installed capacity base of 30% that is going to come in through oil and gas. Large hydro, we've seen some really big hydroelectric plants coming up in Southeast Asia. India and China already have existing hydroelectric plants, so there could be an almost 40% increase, actually 45% increase, from 1,300 gigawatts of installed capacity in large hydro projects going up to about 2,000 gigawatts. When it comes to coal, again, and I kind of repeat, although there is a fall, we are looking at minus 23% decrease of installed capacity. This is slightly different from 30% usage, which I showed you in the previous slide. This is in actual installed capacity that is coming on stream. So you still have, the coal-fired plants which are going to be in use. But the good news perhaps is that the actual installation of newer plants is going to decrease over the next 30 years. But they are still going to be around. They will still be generating a percentage of our electricity, and that is something that cannot be wished away. So let's come to our sort of core theme, right? The increase and the usage of renewable energy, of clean sources of energy, of net carbon neutral or low carbon sources of energy across our energy mix. Uh, the sort of bulk of that is going to be led by solar. Wind is not very far away, and sort of nuclear sort of maintains its pace. There were a lot of negative aspects about nuclear, especially after Fukushima. Japan, which was the largest nuclear power generator in or nuclear power consumer in the world, had shut down all its nuclear plants, which have hence been restarted. South Korea is another utilizer of nuclear plants. Although India and China do not feature very high when it comes to nuclear energy, they are also looking at setting up some nuclear plants. And nuclear today has found favor in Western Europe, because when you look at the high gas prices, when you look at TTF going up threefold, going around near 30 MMBTU, where landed LNG is today in and around $25 per MMBTU. The net energy importers, or the sort of net utilizers of gas, which need which is who are in Western Europe, who have to import gas, whether it is piped through Russia or whether it is shipped through LNG. These are the countries that are going to face sort of the brunt of higher gas prices. They already have been facing the brunt of higher gas prices. And to them, nuclear is a solution. You would see, nuclear kind of going up from about 2,700 terawatt hours of generation to about 3,700, which kind of equates to a 38% increase, right? But the star of the show over the next 30 years, where the maximum amount of energy to build, to operate, and to transmit power, that is going to come from solar. The current sort of generation of solar across the world is just about 833. But by 2050, we see solar to go up almost 111 times, a whopping 1061%, right? That is the total volume, that is the amount of solar energy that is going to be coming on stream over the next 30 years, where countries have realized that, yes, you have an existing energy base. You have an energy base that is supplied by coal, that is going to come down, it's not going to go away. You have an energy base that is going to be supplied by oil and gas, that is not going to slow down, that will either increase at 10-15% or it will remain steady, but that is not going to come down. Where would that incremental energy come from, right? We saw in our first slide, right? This jump that's going to happen, this sort of huge jump that's going to happen, that from near about 573 to near about 943 exajoules, that additional bulk will be supplied by solar PV and to a large extent by wind. When we speak about solar, we kind of talk about solar and wind coming in the same breath, but they're two very, very different sources of energy, both in terms of the way energy is generated, more in terms of the cost of energy that comes out. Historically, there are more places that have abundant sunlight, which can be beneficial for the solar plants. But when it comes to wind energy, there are limited places, whether they are on the shore or whether they are offshore or whether they are near mountainous and hilly areas, which then have to provide that continuous form of wind at a certain speed. The wind velocity is very, very critical in order for the wind turbines to increase. And over the next sort of 10 years, we see that the wind capacity is goes up by more than double. But over the next sort of coming 10 years, and if you look at between 2030 and 2050, wind energy will not grow as high as solar, but we're still expecting it to grow 5 times from 1,500 to 8,800, which will lead to an increase of about 450% increase in wind energy. And nuclear energy, like I said, kind of still remains constant at about 38%. Now, this is where the world today stands, where the world has made commitments. And I would like to kind of make a statement here that these are the conservative cases. When you talk about people making net zero commitments, when you talk about people being net zero by 2050, or China saying 2060, or India saying 2070, these numbers will not be valid, right? These numbers have been taken from the IEA in their base case scenario, what they call as STEPS, that is stated policy, stated energy policy. These are the forward-looking numbers that have been projected on the basis of what the existing policy today looks like. There have been commitments that have been made, but those commitments still are on paper. Those commitments, a lot of those commitments have not been translated into actionable change in policy. And that is why this number would, in my view, be the most truest reflection of where the world stands today. If India is really, really sort of inclined to move towards net zero by 2070, it will have to make a lot of changes. We will discuss that by tomorrow in our discussion. If there is going to be a commitment by Western Europe, or if there's going to be commitment by North America to speed up their net zero commitments, then these numbers will have to increase. This sort of generating capacity in solar and wind will have to go up. Whether it can go up, whether it is possible, is anybody's guess, because in my mind, over the next 30 years, if you're looking at an 11 times growth, not an 11% growth, but if you're looking at 11 times growth, that is not very easily doable, right? That is going to require capital, that is going to require political capital, that's going to require a will to move away from fossil fuels and non-renewable sources of energy. So who is doing this? Who are sort of the leaders when it comes to non-renewable energy? Today, as we stand, it is Asia Pacific, which is in terms of generating electricity through renewables. 37% of the total renewable energy generated in the world comes from Asia Pacific, which and Asia is expected to kind of maintain this lead. It is going to grow from 37% to 47%, from 37% to 47%. Asia Pac will be the only sort of geographical area across the world which will actually see an increase in the percentage of renewable energy generation, or which will see its share of total renewable energy from the total energy generated actually growing. North America, which currently has about a 17% share, will see its share fall down to 18%. The biggest jump will actually come from Europe. Currently, Europe is the sort of second largest contributor to electricity generation coming from renewable sources of energy, but that will go down. We see that this will fall from 20% to about 14%. The sort of rationale for this is that although Europe will not be moving to polluting form of energy, but the total energy consumption in Europe is expected to fall drastically. And by that, when the total energy consumption goes down, the sort of proportionate investment and the build up in renewable sources will also be going down proportionately. Hence, we see that fall. This does not mean that sort of the commitment to clean energy is going down in Europe. That kind of remains intact. Their move to EVs, their move to solar, their move to wind, a bulk of the wind energy capacity that is going to be coming on stream over the next 10 years, which we saw in the previous slide, will actually come from the European. The other sort of contributors, whether it is Africa, is kind of going to remain constant. Central America will see another huge fall, where currently they contribute about 14%, and in Central America, the sort of biggest contributor is Brazil, which brings in about 68% of the total Central and South American installed capacity on stream. And they are not looking at a further increase in their revenue generation or their electricity generation through renewables, hence this number of about 8%. Now, even in Asia Pacific, right, there is a huge demarcation because a bulk of this growth from Asia Pac comes from just one country, which is China. If you look at where sort of China stands today, right, you are talking about 2,200 gigawatts of 2,200 terawatts of energy generation, which will go up to about 8,000 terawatts. Right there, you're talking a bulk of increase of about 263% in the next 20 years, which is the massive jump that is going to be coming in only from one country, China. India is not a country that's going to be sort of left behind. We are looking at a slightly lower marginal base, or fairly low marginal base, about 360 terawatt hours. But that amount will kind of grow substantially to about 3,500 terawatt hour. This means that India will see a near 900% jump, which will make it the second largest renewable energy generator in the world by 2050, much higher than the United States, which is expected to see about a 260% increase. Definitely much higher than the European Union, which perhaps will see about a 148% increase. And Japan, which again will see a fairly substantial increase, but not by so much, is kind of expected to see about a 154%. But the sort of installed capacity base in Japan is low to begin with. The reason for the installed capacity going up or the renewable energy generation increasing manifold in China is primarily because of their thrust towards solar. They are looking at adding solar capacity at a breakneck speed. In tomorrow's session, we will briefly kind of go over what is the installed capacity base of solar in China, and more importantly, what are the tariffs that are going on? What are the subsidies that the different governments in India, China, in the EU, and North America provide to renewables, primarily solar companies, in order to make them competitive, in order to make this sector sort of more investor friendly, more user friendly. So that is all going to come in the next session. At this point, I will stop. I've been going on for about 45 minutes. We wanted to keep this session under an hour. So I'll keep about 10 odd minutes for questions. If there are any questions, I'll be kind of happy to take them at this point. No questions? I think I was very clear in what I said, or I was very confusing in what I said. Has to be one of the two. Hi, is anybody there? Yes, after I think there's somebody wanted this slide. Once we are done with the session tomorrow, I will be sharing the entire slide pack with the organizers, and you can then take it from there. All right. If there are no questions, then perhaps we can close the session. We will talk about renewable energy in India and China. We'll be talking about the fiscal systems and the cost benefit analysis coming in from renewables. What aspects of India will take the country to become the second largest renewable energy generator? We're already on track for India to be the second largest energy generator, second larger generator of energy through renewables. And again, these numbers, they are not they don't come in from any promulgations or any sort of grandiose plans which the politicians or the government has made. These are actual policies that are in the process of being implemented. So the IEA's base case, some would call it the pessimist, or some would call it the not very aggressive case, the step scenario that they care to call it, picks up numbers or builds up its models based on what the policy exists as of today. Policy that has been either set in motion or policy that exists as it were. And given that, there has been a declaration that the government of India will look at having an installed capacity base of 465 gigawatts of renewable energy in India by 2030. Today, our installed capacity base is not even 100 gigawatts. We've got about 40 odd gigawatts of solar, about 40 odd gigawatts from wind. You've got about 26 gigawatts from large hydro projects, and about a percentage of 1 or 2 gigawatts from nuclear. Right. So you're talking about moving from 110, 120 gigawatts to 450 gigawatts. That's going to be a huge number. How much of it is achievable, how much of it is doable, still remains to be seen. But I think India is on the right track. If you're today looking at becoming the second largest generator by a margin, right? You're looking at about almost a 9 times, almost a 10-time increase. That is difficult, but at least the processes have been put in place. How it's going to pan out fiscally, how is it going to be economically, is something that will have to be seen, and we'll touch aspects of that tomorrow, right? So I think everybody's saying thank you, which is I thank you for coming and listening to us. We will be touching on renewable energy in India and some fiscal aspects tomorrow. So once both the sessions are over, this data will then be shared through the organizers. So if there are no other questions, I will close the day. Advantage, is it okay if we can close for the day? All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining in.